opinions expressed on this program are the views of the host and not necessarily the views of the University of Missouri St. Louis or this station.
So, hey everyone, as I promised, we have a topic of the day. Last week we started with part one of how America treats its citizens, and as promised, we are coming back to you with part two. The method to the madness is the name of the topic. And like I mentioned earlier, yes, it is a touchy subject, but at the same time, if you want to learn a little bit stumping, stay tuned. Don't respond off of emotion. Stay tuned and listen in. I do have my guest speaker here, and I'm going to introduce him. And now, here is the man who is trying to give sight to those that can't see what's going on, my friend and yours, Bobby G. Stewart.
How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can definitely hear you.
Okay. Well, first off, I would like to thank, as usual, excuse me, have a little bit of a cold.
Get your throat together.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a cold that I'm suffering from.
Okay.
But anyway, as usual, I would like to thank Miss Monroe here on the Monroe Show for allowing me to come to you all. Now, originally, well, actually not originally, but last week, as she had mentioned, we had spoke of the situation with regards to how I found out how this country treats at least a certain segment of its citizens. Now, with that being said, lack the education and the skills to make themselves employable, because money for such activity is insufficient. Well, one of the results is that the citizens, they cannot compete globally with others when it comes to everything technological and industrial. Therefore, others overseas get the jobs being paid money that we in this country would consider slave wages. In such situations where over in countries such as Indonesia, China, they perform activity of manufacturing goods and services, goods that we wear here in what would be called sweatshop conditions. And of course, back here at home, when people can't find employment because the money to fund education and worker retraining don't exist, well, one of the results is an upswing in crime. For example, in the fiscal year of 2012, $107 billion, that's with a B, $billion was spent on education, while $68 billion in taxpayer money was spent on mass incarceration, of which the U.S. is the global leader in. And this was done under the pretext of fighting this so-called war on drugs. And of course, this war on drugs, it eats up a lot of people's lives and it ruins a lot of families because people are being, warehoused basically when they could otherwise be more productive citizens, being retrained and educated to be more productive in the workforce. Now, here's some other stats for you that I'd like to throw at you right quick. 60% of all of those that I mentioned that are in prison, in this country are in prison for nonviolent activity, namely low-level marijuana possession and usage. Now, if half of all of these nonviolent offenders were to be released, for example, this would save the U.S. $17 billion. And of course, we all know where that money could be put towards. Yeah, that's right. Worker retraining and education. Now, as a result, the authorities and the Washington, D.C. policymakers would rather incarcerate people at a cost of $30,000 per inmate annually. And of course, because funding for education and retraining of its citizens, to make us more technically and industrially competitive, falls way short of what is needed. Well, then schools are closing, and this helps to perpetuate the dropout rate, and it contributes to the reduction in academic prowess, which is needed for this country to to be globally competitive. Now, one of the main culprits in this is government military spending, and this exacerbates the educational underfunding, and this is done to the tune of 680 billion with a B, 680 billion plus. Now, of course, in conjunction with government military spending, what also is factored in is when you have no jobs available and when crime is on the upswing, well, then this feeds the prison industrial complex and the companies that run the prisons for profit operations. And as we all know, for those that don't know, tens of thousands of inmates are paid anywhere from pennies on the dollar to minimum wage to produce products and services that undercut the regular American citizen from being able to feed their families with livable wages. Now, let me give you an example of how this activity is conducted. There's a prison for profit subcontractor. They're called Third Generation. They manufacture lingerie and leisure wear for brand name outlets such as Victoria's Secret and J.C. Penney. Now, isn't that interesting? And it gets even more interesting when you see how interconnected the situation is between the military and these prisons for profit companies in conjunction with defense contractors. Now, to go on a little further, there's another prisons for profit operation called Federal Prison Industries, also known as Unicor. They have had at times prisoners produce soldier helmets, uniforms, and shoes for, the soldiers here in this country, in addition to the wiring harnesses for fighter jets and tanks. Now, there's a government defense contractor by the name of Boeing, and I don't know if you all are aware, but we have a Boeing operation here in the St. Louis area. Now, they are the largest exporter of military weaponry and defense systems in terms of sales to the tune of $63 billion annually. And they are the second largest government defense contractor. Now, they have subcontracted work. Well, they did subcontract work back in 1997 to a firm known as Microjet. Now, this Microjet firm, they had prisoners cutting airplane components while paying them $7 an hour that union workers would have made $30 an hour doing the same job. So with all of this being said, now you see how undercutting expenditure for education and worker retraining, how it fails to make for a well-educated citizenry and a citizenry that's productive and that can compete globally. But instead, they would rather, the policymakers, the movers and shakers here in this country, they would rather spend money on incarcerating its citizens, making profit off of them, instead of paying people a livable wage to feed their families, as I had said. And the sad part is that the government is in cahoots with it, as I had just explained to you. So you can take it or leave it for what it's worth. I'm not here to bash the country. What I am here to do is to offer information to show you what is happening with the citizens here in this country, or at least a certain segment. And as I had said last week, that certain segment could be either racially or from the socioeconomic standpoint. And obviously, the people that are the most prone to unemployment, they are the ones that fall prey to all of this. So as usual, like I always say, if you don't believe me, do your own research. I just hope that those of us here in the listening audience can find this information very helpful and that you can pass it along to your children and anybody else that may be in activity that leads them to a life of crime, to where in which they will end up becoming a slave. So with that being said, I would like to thank Miss Monroe and her show here on the Monroe Show. And one of these days, we'll see things happen a little bit better. But other than that, come on with the great music that you've always provided for our listeners.
And thank you very much, not Mr. Bobby G. Stewart, for coming on my show, being willing as always. I do, before you take off your headphones,
okay,
I want you to, real quick for the people, go over the prisons for profit topic and just kind of explain to them what exactly that is and what they do.
Well, it's kind of simple. In a prisons for profit scenario, you have companies that actively build prisons, and what they call themselves doing is relieving, like the regular federal and state prison populations. And what they do is they take these prisoners and they use these prisoners as a workforce to manufacture and or produce goods and services that are done at a lower wage. In other words, the regular company on the outside here in the free world, if they were to pay a person $10, $12, $15 an hour and, to do manufacturing in whatever various sectors, whether it's the automotive sector or whatever, well, instead of paying people that type of wage, a prisons for profit situation does the exact opposite. They are built to make a profit by paying people substandard wages to produce the same goods and services that people produce in regular society.
Okay, so then that therefore makes
them a slave.
Right, okay, I was just getting ready to say that. So, knowing this, and people that are in the business of, prison for profits and who make money off that, and I'm pretty sure they understand and know the
ramifications.
Yeah, the ramifications, and what the overall deal of it is that you're putting people in prison for these bull crap, things that they may do, and then you're making money off of them. And I don't know, I heard, well, let me ask you, have you known of any, or anybody other than companies, like someone individually who is involved with prison for profit, firsthand?
Well, according to my research, there's a guy, I'm pretty sure most of us know him as the former host of The Price is Right. His name is Bob Barker. He is one of the more notable individuals that invest in prisons for profit activities. Now, of course, in addition to him, according to my research, and again, you can do your own research, I've come to the knowledge that one of our most famous athletes of all time, Michael Jordan, is also an investor in that activity. Now, of course, he wouldn't let you know that, and the people on the airwaves, like say, for example, the sports commentators, they wouldn't let you know that. Now, I would have to say that if a lot of people would say that this is more rumor than truth, well, I tell you what, as usual, do your own research. But I would find it rather distressful that an individual such as Michael Jordan would profit off of individuals that are sent to prison rather than to use his influence, whatever power that he may have, to try to help rectify that situation as opposed to profiting from it.
Okay, true that. Yeah, I totally agree. I had heard the thing about Michael Jordan too, but I hadn't really did my own research about it. So that's why I asked you, someone who is well researched. And like he did mention, if you have any objection to what we say, it's no big thing. The internet is out there for everyone. You can find somewhere where it's free. For example, the library right here on campus. You don't have to pay. Go over there and do your own research. I always say, before you try to argue down a point, do your own research first and then come with some, your objectives to what was said. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and get back to the music. Like I did say earlier in the show, I have some old school rap coming your way. When rap had a serious message, not this rap that we have today that talks about nothing but money, cars, and clothes and all that negative stuff. We're going to get right into the music, so stay tuned.